We haven't talked much about Lucid in a while, and that's probably because there's not a whole lot of news surrounding them, but I have visited their showroom twice now, got to get pretty up close to the prototypes that they have in the showroom, and talk to some of the employees there about the company. And I definitely have a few suggestions that have been on my mind, and I just figured why not encompass them into a little video for you guys so you can understand why I have a few issues, but overall I'm somewhat hopeful for the company. I think that fundamentally the reason I have a hard time getting excited for Lucid or struggle to really have that same passion that some people seem to have about them is just because I feel like they don't have enough of a distinction that really separates them from everybody else on the market. If you look at Lucid right now, or ask the employees or ask the company what's supposed to set them aside from the competition, it's really somewhat vague. It's basically about luxury and using premium materials and also having great energy efficiency and great range, which, let's be honest, there's lots of companies in the EV community going all for that same style. We've got the Porsche Taycan, we got the e-tron, we've got Tesla with the Model S Plaid, and that's arguably not the luxury market because Lucid claims due to just the materials of the interior it's going after a different market. But now we got the Mercedes EQS entering the picture, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of other six-figure luxury electric sedans with great range in the next few years. So that's why I think I struggle a bit with Lucid on how they separate themselves from the competition. They've got some neat features for sure. The interior seems well built, and some people may like that expansive display behind the steering wheel. For me, personally, I would much rather have a display that's good for both the driver and the passenger when you're parked, not just an immersive display for only when you're driving, but it's a style a lot of people prefer for sure. But I have to imagine that the majority of Lucid's pre-orders are obviously going to be for their lowest tier trim that they're currently still taking orders for, called the Air Pure. But I think part of the reason Lucid is lacking some of that identity or distinction that they need is because their lineup is frankly kind of confusing and a bit too distorted in my opinion. So we have the Air Dream Edition at the very top, which they're no longer taking reservations for. This is the fastest Lucid they make, with a range just barely going over 500 miles. They're probably only going to make, 500 of them or something pretty low like that, but it's like $180,000. And then below that we have the Air Grand Touring Edition, which has actually a bit of a longer range but a tad less horsepower. So if you care more about getting the longest possible range in a vehicle, this one's closer to $130,000. But the 0 to 60 times, of course, are going to be a bit slower. And then below that you have Air Touring, which has a 400-mile range, but it's actually below the six-figure mark, which I guess is pretty nice. And at the very bottom you have the Air Pure, which all of these vehicles have somewhat similar interiors. A few features like massage seats or ventilated seats are more exclusive to things like the Dream Edition and the Grand Touring and Air Touring. Air Pure is supposed to have a body roof, so no glass roof, but still it's going to have doors that automatically open and close, which I'm a big fan of. It's still supposed to have a over 400-mile range, and whenever that Air Pure ends up being available, then I could see it as actually being a somewhat decent Tesla Model S competitor, because we're talking 400-mile range department alongside around a $70,000 to $80,000 starting price. And if some people prefer a more traditional interior, one with a full steering wheel and gear stalks and having a display behind the wheel, some people still like that and would much rather have that over a Tesla Model S, and I could see that being a very price competitive alternative. But personally, I think the Air Grand Touring or Air Touring should be merged into one product. I don't think there needs to be so many separate tiers across the whole lineup, and I don't know why they keep wanting to brag about the Air Dream Edition if they're going to be doing such a limited production of them in the first place. And the frunk of these vehicles is pretty large compared to any other sedan I've seen, but you are winning some in the frunk space but losing some in the trunk space compared to something like a Tesla Model S, which actually has a full hatchback. The Lucids all pretty much just have a normal trunk because of the decision to have that glass back swoop down quite a bit, so it's not in a hatch design, and that means that your trunk space overall is not too plentiful, but your frunk space is. But personally, what I think would really help Lucid kind of find their own identity and find a distinction that somewhat separates them from the rest of the luxurious EV community would be executive seating, which they talked about a while back, and most recently they've gone kind of quiet about it, and I don't even see it referenced much on the website anymore, but it was something in their development many years ago that they said that was going to be offered someday. It essentially allowed the back seats of the vehicle to look like first-class airline transport seats that recline back a lot and even have plenty of foot room for you you to put your feet up, and it just looked very relaxing and like a great way to take advantage of the glass roof you have on most of these vehicles. And I want to know why they couldn't go forward with that. Like, what came up during mass production as to why that couldn't make it to market? Because in my opinion, that was one of the coolest interior features that somewhat set them apart from the Mercedes or the Teslas or the Taycans of the world. There's so many different luxury, you know, sporty, somewhat high-range EVs out there for people to choose from, and Lucid having great range somewhat helps, but their price point is so drastically higher between models that, in my opinion, are very similar. Like, between the Air Touring and the Dream Edition, you've got like almost $100,000 between those two vehicles, and the main difference is like 100 miles of range and I guess just performance and horsepower, which in my opinion doesn't quite justify an additional 6 figures on top of that price point. And I think that's overall where the lineup is a bit confusing to me. It's likely like this because Lucid is still in startup mode and they haven't delivered vehicles to customers yet, so they're probably counting on those Dream Editions having very, very thick profit margins so that they can eventually bring the Air Pures to the market and have something with much thinner profit margins and not go bankrupt. But either way, I think their lineup could use much more simplicity, because just checking out the showroom and talking to the people in there, even the employees were starting to get a tad confused about what's in the lineup and what is available on which model, and I don't think the website does an incredibly good job explaining the differences either. But I think the executive seating option would have been a great counterpoint as to how Lucid is going to set themselves aside from the competition, and I don't know if Lucid can win the range argument anymore, as Tesla is going to be ramping their 4680 batteries, and the Plaid Plus Model S is rumored to be well over 520 miles of range for probably much cheaper than any of Lucid's vehicles, so I don't know if amazing range is going to be enough to separate them from the rest of the competition, but I think there's room for them to exist, although I definitely get more excited for EV companies that are focused more on making affordable models, whether it be the Apteras of the world, or the ID4s, or even something like Rivian, which is not too affordable, but at least it's going after a market that I feel like there's not much presence in. I appreciate Rivian for saying we're going to do all-electric adventure vehicles, because most EVs right now are just kind of high-priced luxury sedans. We don't have enough EVs that are going to be built for getting in the dirt and built for going off-road. There's not any all-electric pickup trucks right now, or even that many all-electric full-size SUVs, so Rivian is seeing a vacancy in the market and tackling that, whereas in my opinion Lucid is going after a market that's kind of saturated and very crowded as is, which is why I'm hesitant to get excited, and they don't get me as pumped as much as other companies do. But I think that all-electric companies pushing sustainable energy is a good thing at the end of the day. I still think Lucid is doing more for EVs than probably Toyota right now. Oh yeah, we're gonna unveil 15 models before 2025, but they're probably all gonna launch in 2025. So I hope Lucid can kind of find their market, can kind of find their voice, and find a way to separate themselves from everybody else. I'm curious what you guys think Lucid should do to separate themselves from everybody else. What do you think can make them more iconic or recognizable? Do you like the design? Do you hate the design? All that good stuff. Let's talk about it. Thank you all for watching. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Take care.